Hello, this is the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Thank you so much for tuning into this video in which we calculate one quantity as a percentage of another. So the kind of question we will need to be able to do, something like this. If I score 12 out of 15 in my test, what is my mark as a percentage? So here we have two quantities and we want to turn that into a percent. So please understand, in this video we're looking at finding what the percentage is. In the next lesson we're going to look at finding a percent of a quantity. That's when I already know the percent. Here I don't know the percent and I want to calculate it. So what is the point of this? Well, converting one quantity of another to a percent allows easy comparison. You know, if you got 12 out of 15 in a test, you're probably thinking, did I do well? Did I not do well? But by converting it to a percent, we can compare that to other tests, other people in the class really easily. So let's first look at how we would convert 12 out of 15 into a percentage. Well, fortunately, this is something we've pretty much already done. Previous lesson, we looked at converting fractions to a percentage, and that's exactly what we're doing here. We're just taking a fraction and converting it to a percentage, because I can write 12 out of 15 like this. It's exactly what this says, 12 out of 15. And if I want to convert that to a percentage, you know that I adjust times by 100 and stick a percent sign on. That's how I go from a fraction to a percent. So you can use your calculator for this. You can just write 12 over 15 times 100, or if you're not using a calculator, you do 12 times 100, which is 1200, and divide by 15. So either way, the answer you should get is 80, and then you put a percent sign on. 12 out of 15 equals 80%. So what we're saying, essentially, 12 out of 15 is the same as 80 over 100. These two fractions have the exact same value. They're both equal to 0.8. But of course, 80 over 100 is 80%. That's what percentages are. So we're saying if this test had 100 marks or 100 questions, you would have got 80 of them right. And that allows for easy comparison. So let's just quickly write the steps that we took to get this answer. So all we did was take the first quantity, divide it by the second quantity, write that as a fraction, and then convert the fraction to a percent by timesing 100%. So there's two easy steps. Just write first quantity over second quantity as a fraction, that's the first step, and then times by 100%. So as I said, this allows for some very easy comparisons. We'll look at that in the next example. So please pause and copy this down if you need. So let's look at this question here. Daniel and Ryan, goal kickers for their respective rugby league teams. Daniel has kicked 50 goals from 60 attempts, and Ryan has kicked 28 from 35 attempts. And we're going to look at who is the more accurate goal kicker. So it's pretty hard to tell just from these numbers who is more accurate. I mean, clearly Daniel has kicked more goals, but he's also had more attempts. So what we could do is we could write each person's accuracy as a percentage, and that will allow for an easy comparison. So let's start with Daniel. So what are we actually doing here? Well, we're saying he's scored 50 out of 60 attempts. We're sort of trying to figure out how many, at this rate, he would kick if he had 100 attempts. And the same is true for Ryan. We know that he's scored 28 of his 35 attempts. We want to know if he had 100 attempts, how many would he score? So by making both of them have 100 attempts, which is kind of what we're doing, it's really easy to tell who'd be the better goal kicker. Because what's really difficult here is, as I said, they've both had a different number of attempts. So it's hard to tell who's more accurate. So this is what we're doing. We're finding what number goes in this box and this box. We're finding out if both of them had 100 attempts, how many Daniel would kick and how many Ryan would kick. So all we're going to do now is we are going to convert this fraction into a percent and then this fraction into a percent and see who has the higher percent. So for Daniel, we just go 50 over 60 times 100%. So you can use your calculator for this and you won't get a whole number. And I want to make that point. Percentages don't need to be a whole number. So 50 over 60 times 100%. If you put that on your calculator, you get 83.3%. The threes go on forever. We can just write it like this. So Daniel has kicked 83.3% of his attempts. So we're saying if Daniel were to have 100 attempts at goal, 100 shots at goal, he would get 83.3 of them. So this is just an average. On average, he'd get 83.3 of them. So for Ryan, we're going to convert his fraction to a percent. 28 over 35 times 100%. So if we put that in our calculator, we get 80%. So Ryan has kicked 80% of his shots at goal. 80% of his shots were successful. So we can see very clearly that Daniel is slightly more accurate of a kicker than Ryan. He has kicked slightly more. If Ryan had 100 shots, we'd expect on average he'd get 80 of those shots. Whereas we'd expect Daniel get a few more, 83. So clearly we can see who is the more accurate kicker. It is Daniel. Percentages allowed us to do that. Without percentages, it was really hard to determine whether 50 over 60 is more than 28 over 35. Okay, there's just one more thing I need to do, and that is go through something about units. So please pause and copy this down if you need. So to say what I wanted to say about units, I'll illustrate it in this example. So let's say I need to walk 12 kilometers for the walkathon. If I've walked 120 meters, what percentage of the journey have I completed? So if we're doing a question like this, again, we want to find the percentage. We should have some idea of what the answer should be. So 12 kilometers is a long distance, 120 meters isn't a lot. So we expect the percentage here to be very low. We haven't gone very far. We haven't completed much of this walk. So what we're finding here is what percentage 120 meters is of 12 kilometers. Is it 10%? Is it 100%? Is it 30%? Whatever. So here, the two quantities are in different units. So that's not what happened in the previous example. So the first example I gave was about questions. Both quantities were about the number of questions or the number of marks. Second example I gave where we looked at the goal kicking. Both quantities were referring to the number of goals. They're both the number of something, but here the quantities are in different units. One's in meters and one is in kilometers. So what I must first do is convert them so they are in the same units. I can't just go 120 over 12 times 100%. That won't work. That would actually give me an answer of 1,000%, which is clearly not right. I can't do that because the two quantities are in different units. So let's change them so they're in the same units. Let's change 12 kilometers so it's in meters. So I should know to go from kilometers to meters, I just times 1,000. 12 kilometers is 12,000 meters. So now the two quantities are in the same units. I can just do what I did in previous examples. First quantity over the second quantity times 100 and stick a percent sign on. So the answer, if you put this in your calculator, you should get 1, stick a percent sign, it is 1%. So therefore, I have completed 1% of the journey. So this 12-kilometer walk, we can sort of break it up into 100 equal parts, 100 equal stages of 120 meters. You have to walk like 120 meters 100 times, and I've done that once. That's what it means by 1% of the journey is completed. I need to walk 100 times longer than this to finish the journey. All right, thank you so much for tuning into this video. This has been the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Have a great day.